this door, Sebastian!
Delilah Thornwick, HOA president, is smashing my front door with a crowbar, oblivious it's now half a ton of bulletproof steel. 2 weeks ago, I buried my dad, military funeral. Came home in the rain to find my locks changed. No notice, just her spite over a navy blue mailbox. Locked out at 3 a.m., soaked, clutching Dad's folded flag. Slept in my truck like a stranger at my own house. I'm a federal structural engineer. I don't play games, so I installed a certified bank vault door, $22,000, 3-inch composite steel, fireproof, biometrics only for me. Permits? All approved. Now her crowbar bounces off harmlessly. Channel 12 films her meltdown, blazer ruined, face red, neighbors record. She screams, violations. The door doesn't even dent. Her power ends here. What would you do if HOA locked you out at your lowest? Team vault door or just move? Drop your HOA horror story and where you're watching from. Texas, Florida, Cali, hell. Sebastian Cecilia Rodriguez never wanted to be the guy who fights the HOA. At 45, he'd spent 2 decades designing structural systems that keep government buildings from collapsing and nuclear facilities from becoming craters. Boring, precise work that pays well and keeps him far away from office politics and petty power games. Then his father Frank died and everything went to shit. 3 weeks ago, heart attack at 68. Sebastian inherited the corner lot ranch house in Riverside Meadows where the old man had lived peacefully for 25 years. The place smelled like Old Spice and coffee grounds, filled with photos of Frank's Navy buddies and his prized possession, a navy blue mailbox painted to match his service colors. Not bright blue, navy blue. The exact shade that made Frank smile every time he grabbed his mail. Riverside Meadows looked normal enough. 200 homes, middle-class Phoenix suburb, the kind of place where neighbors wave and mind their own business. Sebastian had been living there quietly for 6 months, auto-paying his HOA dues, following every ridiculous rule while he sorted through decades of his father's memories. He should have realized that Delilah Thornwick was hunting him. Delilah, 52, 8-year HOA president and part-time real estate vulture. She treated the community like her personal fiefdom, backed by Brad Kowalski, a nervous insurance adjuster who'd agree with her if she said gravity was optional. The other 3 board members were wallpaper, present but useless when actual decisions needed making. The harassment started small. Violation notices for grass clippings visible more than 4 hours after mowing. Garbage can 3 inches too far from the curb. A tiny oil spot on his driveway from his pickup. Each violation, $50 fine, increasingly nasty language about community standards. Sebastian paid them without argument. Grief makes you compliant. Then came the mailbox ultimatum. 2 days before Frank's funeral, a certified letter arrived demanding he repaint the navy blue mailbox to approved desert tan or sage green. Some bullshit new color policy allegedly voted on 6 months ago, right when Frank was having heart problems and missing meetings. Sebastian called Delilah directly. The conversation lasted exactly 90 seconds. My father painted this mailbox to honor his military service. It's been navy blue for 15 years. Rules are rules, Mr. Rodriguez. She butchered his hyphenated surname on purpose. The community voted, 10 days to comply or face escalating fines. I'm burying my father this weekend. Can we discuss this when I get back? Death doesn't excuse property violations. Sebastian hung up before he said something that would require an apology. The funeral was perfect. Military honors, flag ceremony, a dozen Vietnam veterans who'd served with Frank. 3 days in Pennsylvania handling arrangements, accepting condolences, trying to process that the man who taught him precision and integrity was gone. Red-eye flight back to Phoenix landed Tuesday morning during a desert thunderstorm. By the time Sebastian reached home, he was soaked, exhausted, and running on pure emotional fumes. All he wanted was to collapse in Frank's old recliner and figure out what to do with 25 years of accumulated memories. His house key didn't work. Sebastian stood in his driveway at 3 a.m., rain drumming against his shoulders, trying different angles on a lock that was definitely not the same one he'd been using for 6 months. Newer, shinier, completely incompatible with his key. No notice, no explanation, no emergency justification. The metallic scraping of that useless key against foreign hardware, that's the sound that turned grief into rage. He had to wake up Robert, the plumber 3 doors down, and beg to sleep on his couch like some homeless stranger. The humiliation cut deeper than the loss. Lying on Robert's sectional at 4 a.m., staring at the ceiling, Sebastian realized this wasn't about mailbox colors or property standards. This was about a woman who thought she could break a federal structural engineer while he was already broken by grief. Professional mistake. When you design systems that can't fail, you develop a very specific response to people who try to make them fail. Delilah Thornwick had just declared war on the wrong fucking engineer. The next morning, Sebastian woke up on Robert's couch with a crick in his neck and the kind of cold rage that makes engineers dangerous. Nothing focuses the mind like sleeping on someone else's furniture because a power-hungry real estate agent thinks she can play games with a man who's just buried his father. Robert had coffee ready and a work shirt that smelled like pipe joint compound, infinitely better than vanilla air freshener and bullshit. Man, I can't believe they locked you out during your dad's funeral. That's some stone-cold evil right there. Did you see who changed the locks? Yeah, Pete's locksmith around 2 p.m. Tuesday. Had paperwork from the HOA management company. Robert's weathered face scrunched up. Seemed fishy, but you know how it is. Nobody wants to poke the bear. Sebastian spent the morning becoming very familiar with Arizona property law. 20 minutes on the phone with Pete's locksmith revealed that Delilah had authorized an emergency lock change, citing security concerns about unauthorized occupancy. The locksmith couldn't provide any documentation of the alleged security threat, but he damn sure had documentation of the $340 emergency fee billed directly to the HOA. She'd used community funds to lock him out of his own house. That crossed the line from petty harassment into actual embezzlement. The Maricopa County Recorder's Office smelled like old paper and bureaucratic indifference, but it contained exactly what Sebastian needed. Every document related to his property since 1965. Deed, tax records, and most importantly, the original 1985 HOA covenant that established Riverside Meadows. Page 23, section 4.7. Pre-existing landscaping, structures, and exterior features installed prior to January 1, 1990 shall be considered grandfathered and exempt from future architectural modifications. Frank's navy blue mailbox, lovingly installed in 1987, was bulletproof under the community's own founding documents. Every violation notice Delilah had issued wasn't just wrong, it was legally invalid. Sebastian had learned years ago that when dealing with government contracts, you always read the original specifications before accepting any change orders. Same principle applied to HOA tyrants. Armed with a folder full of ammunition, Sebastian drove to Delilah's real estate office. The moment he walked through the door, that cloying vanilla air freshener hit him like a chemical assault. Delilah sat behind a glass desk displaying at least 30 property listings. He counted 7 from Riverside Meadows alone. "Mr. Rodriguez, I wasn't expecting you." She didn't look up from her computer screen. "I trust you've resolved your mailbox situation?" "Actually, I've resolved several situations." Sebastian placed the locksmith invoice on her glass desktop with the satisfying sound of paper hitting expensive furniture. "You used HOA funds to illegally change my locks. In most states, that constitutes embezzlement." Her fingers froze over her keyboard. "That was an emergency security measure due to concerns about..." "Document the emergency." Sebastian pulled out his phone and hit record, the little red light reflecting off her glass desk. "Arizona law requires written justification for emergency lock changes. Show me your documentation." The flush creeping up Delilah's neck clashed beautifully with her red power blazer. "You can't record me without my permission. Arizona's a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I'm participating in." He'd learned that particular legal tidbit during a federal contract dispute 3 years ago. Now about that emergency you can't seem to document. Silence stretched between them like a loaded spring. Delilah shuffled business cards with manicured fingers that trembled just slightly, the first crack in her armor. "Furthermore," Sebastian continued, placing the 1985 covenant on top of the locksmith bill, "my father's mailbox is grandfathered under the original community charter. Every violation you've issued violates your own governing documents." That's when Delilah's face went through a fascinating spectrum of colors: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally settling on something that looked like panic. "That charter has been superseded by subsequent amendments. Show me the amendments. Show me the community vote. Show me the 75% homeowner approval required for major covenant changes under Arizona law." She couldn't. because they didn't exist. Sebastian walked out 10 minutes later with a $340 reimbursement check and absolute certainty that Delilah Thornwick was running a sophisticated real estate scam. Those 7 Riverside Meadows listings weren't coincidental. She was systematically terrorizing homeowners into panic sales, then scooping up prime properties at distressed prices. His phone rang before he reached his truck. "Sebastian, this is Janet Morrison from Elm Street. Robert gave me your number." The voice was elderly, but steel-edged with determination. "I heard what happened with your locks. Honey, the exact same thing happened to me last year." 20 minutes later, Sebastian sat across from Janet in a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon and justice. She was 73, retired teacher, recent widow whose husband had died of cancer. Delilah had subjected her to 18 months of escalating harassment, violations for lawn height, driveway stains, even the color of her garden hose. "She does this to people when they're vulnerable," Janet said, stirring her coffee with surgical precision. "Death, divorce, job loss. She can smell weakness like a shark smells blood." "How many others?" 6 that I know personally. All prime corner lots. All bought by Thornwick Real Estate at 15 to 20% below market value after she made their lives unbearable. Sebastian felt that satisfying click when a complex engineering problem suddenly revealed its elegant underlying structure. Delilah wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was running a systematic intimidation racket to acquire prime real estate. Time to reverse engineer her entire operation. Sebastian spent the next 3 days learning that suburban warfare requires the same skills as federal engineering: meticulous documentation, systematic analysis, and the patience to let your enemies hang themselves with their own rope. The HOA's financial records made for fascinating bedtime reading. 3 years of consulting fees paid to Thornwick Real Estate for undefined property management services. $47,000 that somehow never resulted in any visible improvements to community amenities. Even more interesting were the spikes in emergency maintenance costs that perfectly aligned with harassment campaigns against specific homeowners. Janet Morrison proved to be the perfect intelligence asset. 73 years old with the invisibility superpower of elderly women and 40 years of experience managing 5th graders, which meant she could spot bullshit from orbit and had infinite patience for gathering evidence. "Delilah's rattled," Janet reported over coffee that smelled like burnt beans and impending justice. 3 board members are asking uncomfortable questions about that locksmith bill. Maria Santos wants itemized receipts for everything. Tom Berkeley's been reading the original HOA covenants. Everyone except Brad? That man would agree with Delilah if she claimed gravity was optional. Janet's teacher laugh carried decades of dealing with difficult children and their even more difficult parents. But cracks are showing. First rule of classroom management: bullies panic when their authority gets questioned. Sebastian's phone buzzed. "Stop digging or face consequences." A concerned neighbor. He screenshotted the message and sent it to Janet. Her response came back instantly. Delilah always was a terrible speller. Concerned has 2 R's. The psychological warfare escalated Wednesday morning when Sebastian found a violation notice taped to his front door like some amateur hour collection threat. The charge: installation of unauthorized security measures without architectural approval. The security measure was his $99 Ring doorbell. But here's what Delilah didn't understand about federal contractors: everything gets documented, archived, and backed up in triplicate. Sebastian had been building a case file since the day she changed his locks, and every amateur mistake she made just strengthened his position. The violation notice itself was evidence of procedural violations. Arizona HOA law required 48-hour notice via certified mail or witnessed hand delivery. Taping random papers to doors was the kind of Bush League intimidation that would get you laughed out of any serious legal proceeding. Sebastian called the HOA management company directly, bypassing Delilah's little kingdom entirely. "Sir, we have no record of any architectural violation filed against your property," the compliance officer said, her voice carrying that special bureaucratic confusion that meant someone was freelancing outside normal channels. "It's on your letterhead, signed by the HOA president." Long pause. "That's highly irregular. Board members don't handle individual violations. That's what management companies exist for." "Ma'am, I'm beginning to suspect there might be some irregularities in how this entire HOA operates. Would your company be interested in conducting a comprehensive review?" The silence stretched long enough for Sebastian to hear her making notes. "Sir, we would be very interested in that review." By Thursday, Sebastian had assembled a prosecution-grade case file: illegal lock changes, procedural violations, financial irregularities, and clear targeting patterns. But he needed something that would expose Delilah's entire operation in a way she couldn't spin or deflect. That's when he found the smoking gun. City planning records showed that 3 properties Delilah had acquired at below-market prices were permitted for conversion to luxury rentals, a direct violation of Riverside Meadows' founding covenants that specifically restricted rental properties. She wasn't just manipulating desperate homeowners into panic sales. She was planning to convert prime real estate into rental income while serving as HOA president. The conflict of interest was so blatant it bordered on cartoonish villainy. But Sebastian needed her to make an active move that would expose the scheme. So Friday evening, he gave her a target she couldn't possibly resist: LED security floodlights. 6 of them positioned around his corner property with motion sensors and smartphone controls. Completely legal under city ordinance, no HOA approval required, and bright enough to illuminate his father's navy blue mailbox like a patriotic beacon visible from 3 blocks away. The lights also happened to cast dramatic shadows across the vacant lot adjacent to his property, the same lot where Delilah had been conducting suspiciously frequent property evaluations for the past month. Saturday morning, Sebastian tested the system while drinking coffee on his front porch. The motion sensors triggered perfectly, bathing his entire corner lot in brilliant white light while neighboring properties remained in comfortable shadow. Frank's mailbox gleamed like a small monument to service and stubbornness. If Sebastian was right about Delilah's psychological profile, she'd escalate within 48 hours. And this time, he'd have cameras, witnesses, and a federal engineer's understanding of exactly how to make her desperation work against her. His phone buzzed with another anonymous text: "Turn off those lights or else." Sebastian smiled and forwarded the message to Janet along with a note: "Hook, line, and sinker. She just threatened a federal contractor over legal security lighting." Janet's response made him laugh out loud. "Honey, that woman just brought a crayon to a gunfight. Time to show her what precision engineering looked like when applied to suburban justice." Delilah took the bait faster than Sebastian expected, but with a twist that made his engineer's brain appreciate her tactical thinking. Sunday morning at 7 a.m. sharp, she arrived with Brad Kowalski, a man claiming to be from Desert Sun Property Management, and, this was the brilliant part, Mrs. Cecilia from 2 streets over, clutching what appeared to be a formal complaint letter. The Ring doorbell captured everything in high-definition detail, including the moment Sebastian realized Delilah had manufactured an actual complainant. "Mr. Rodriguez, we're here to address serious community concerns about your unauthorized lighting installation," Delilah announced, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who thought she'd finally outmaneuvered him. Mrs. Cecilia filed a formal complaint about excessive glare disrupting her family's sleep patterns. Mrs. Cecilia, roughly 70 and clearly uncomfortable, stepped forward with a handwritten letter. "The lights shine directly into my bedroom window," she said in accented English. "My grandson cannot sleep when they turn on." Sebastian felt his first moment of doubt. Mrs. Cecilia lived 4 houses away around a corner. There was no physical way his lights could shine into her bedroom. But she was holding what looked like genuine distress, and Sebastian's father had taught him never to dismiss elderly neighbors' concerns without investigation. "Mrs. Cecilia, I'm very sorry to hear about this problem. Would you mind showing me exactly where the light intrusion occurs? I'd like to fix this immediately." That's when Tom Mitchell, the alleged property management expert, made his critical mistake. "That won't be necessary. We've already documented the violation with proper measurements." But Sebastian had noticed something while Mrs. Cecilia spoke. Her complaint letter was written in perfect English with technical lighting terminology that no homeowner would naturally use. Terms like luminous flux and light trespass coefficient, engineering language that someone had coached her to include. "Mrs. Cecilia, did someone help you write this complaint?" The elderly woman glanced nervously at Delilah. My son helped with the English words." "Your son's an engineer?" "He works at restaurant." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a multimeter. Mrs. Cecilia's discomfort was genuine, but her complaint was obviously scripted by someone with technical knowledge they'd tried to disguise as layperson concerns. Mrs. Cecilia, would you like to walk over to your house right now so I can see this light problem firsthand? I'll adjust my system immediately if it's actually affecting your family. Delilah jumped in before Mrs. Cecilia could respond. That's not necessary. We have proper documentation. I'd like to hear from Mrs. Cecilia directly. Sebastian stepped off his porch, triggering the motion sensors and flooding his corner lot with brilliant white light that clearly illuminated only his own property. Mrs. Cecilia, can you show me where you see excessive brightness from your bedroom? Mrs. Cecilia looked around in confusion. From her angle, Sebastian's lights were completely blocked by 2 houses and a mature Palo Verde tree. There was literally no line of sight between his security system and her alleged bedroom window. The lights are very bright, she said weakly, clearly realizing the deception was falling apart. Mrs. Cecilia, I think someone has misled you about which lights are causing problems. These lights only illuminate my property and cannot physically reach your house. Would you like me to walk you home and help identify the actual source of the glare? That's when the golden retriever appeared, apparently on loan to Janet Morrison for her morning surveillance mission. The dog trotted directly to Tom Mitchell's equipment bag and began intensive investigation of something that smelled significantly more interesting than light measuring devices. Is that bacon grease on your light meter? Sebastian asked, genuinely fascinated by the amateur hour production unfolding on his front lawn. Tom Mitchell's face went crimson. I may have had breakfast in the truck. But the real revelation came when Mrs. Cecilia stepped closer to Sebastian and lowered her voice. Mr. Rodriguez, the lady said you were causing problems for everyone, that your lights were too bright. She showed me pictures of very bright lights shining into windows. But these are not the same lights. Sebastian felt that familiar click of a complex system revealing its underlying structure. Delilah hadn't just manufactured a complaint. She'd shown Mrs. Cecilia photographs of completely different lighting installations to convince her to file a false report. Mrs. Cecilia, did she show you pictures of my lights specifically, or just pictures of bright lights in general? Just bright lights. She said they were yours, but... Mrs. Cecilia gestured helplessly at Sebastian's properly angled security system. These are not the same. The dominoes started falling fast after that. Tom Mitchell admitted he wasn't actually from a property management company. He was Brad's brother-in-law who worked at a hardware store. The light meter was a borrowed device he didn't know how to operate. The official assessment was complete fabrication, but the real shock came when Mrs. Cecilia pulled out her phone and showed Sebastian the photos Delilah had used to convince her to file the complaint. They weren't random stock photos of bright lights. They were pictures of an actual residential lighting installation that was clearly violating city ordinances. Pictures taken from inside a house, showing glaring floodlights shining directly through bedroom windows. Pictures that, based on the distinctive desert landscaping visible in the background, had definitely been taken somewhere in Riverside Meadows. Delilah hadn't just manufactured evidence, she'd documented someone else's actual violations and tried to frame Sebastian for them. The photos on Mrs. Cecilia's phone weren't just evidence, they were a confession. Sebastian studied the images while Delilah's fake inspection team retreated to Brad's minivan like the amateur conspirators they'd always been. The lighting violations were absolutely real, harsh floodlights blasting directly into bedroom windows, creating exactly the kind of light pollution that violated city ordinances. But the house in the photos wasn't his. Mrs. Cecilia, do you recognize this backyard? She squinted at her phone, then looked around the neighborhood with dawning recognition. Yes. I walk past this house with my granddaughter. The desert plants are very unusual. Janet Morrison appeared beside them with her borrowed golden retriever, because 73-year-old retired teachers apparently had better tactical instincts than most federal contractors. Honey, can I see those photos? Janet asked with the gentle authority that had convinced thousands of fifth graders to confess their playground crimes. After examining the images, her face went through a fascinating spectrum of emotions, before settling on pure righteous fury. That manipulative witch. You recognize it? 847 Elm Street, the Henderson property. Janet's voice carried the certainty of someone who'd memorized every address in her neighborhood during 40 years of teaching local children. Delilah bought it last year after she tortured poor Margaret Henderson into a panic sale. The implications hit Sebastian with the force of a structural failure analysis that suddenly revealed the catastrophic flaw in the entire system. Delilah owned the house where these illegal lights were installed. She'd taken pictures of her own code violations and used them to frame him for lighting problems he'd never created. She documented her own crimes and tried to pin them on me, Sebastian said, feeling that familiar satisfaction when a complex engineering problem revealed its elegant solution. This isn't just harassment, it's systematic fraud with manufactured evidence. Mrs. Cecilia looked like she wanted to disappear into the desert landscape. She told me you were a bad neighbor who makes problems for families, that your lights keep children awake and hurt property values. Mrs. Cecilia, you've been manipulated by someone running a real estate scam. And now we have proof. That's when the golden retriever made the discovery that changed everything. While investigating Tom Mitchell's abandoned equipment bag, apparently drawn by the lingering aroma of breakfast burrito, the dog knocked over a manila folder that spilled documents across Sebastian's front porch. Property listings, financial projections, and a timeline labeled Riverside Meadows Development Strategy, Phase Implementation Schedule. Sebastian had reviewed enough government contracts to recognize a business plan disguised as HOA management. This wasn't random neighbor harassment. It was systematic market manipulation designed to acquire specific properties for development while maintaining legal deniability. Janet, Mrs. Cecilia, you need to see this. The documents laid out a three-phase strategy with the precision of a military operation. Identify prime properties, systematically harass owners into distressed sales, convert acquisitions to rental income while using HOA authority to eliminate competition and control property values. Sebastian's corner lot was labeled Phase 1, Priority Acquisition A. Mrs. Cecilia's house was marked Phase 2, Target 7. Janet's old address appeared as Completed Acquisition 4. She's not just targeting me, Sebastian said, the full scope of Delilah's operation becoming clear. She's running a neighborhood-wide real estate theft operation using the HOA as legal cover. Mrs. Cecilia stared at the papers with growing horror. My house? She plans to force me to sell my house? Mrs. Cecilia, you're not just a witness to fraud, you're her next victim. But the revelation that made Sebastian's blood run cold was simpler and more personal. The timestamp on those incriminating photos. They'd been taken 3 days ago, 2 days after Sebastian installed his legal security system. Delilah hadn't just used existing violations to frame him. She'd created new illegal installations at her own property specifically to manufacture evidence against him. The woman had declared war on his father's memory, his property rights, and his professional reputation using fabricated evidence and systematic fraud. Time to show her what precision engineering looked like when applied to destroying someone who'd made the fatal mistake of underestimating a grieving federal contractor with absolutely nothing left to lose. Sebastian had spent 15 years designing systems that couldn't be allowed to fail under any circumstances. Nuclear facility security, aerospace structural integrity, government building crisis protocols, projects where good enough meant congressional hearings and body counts. Delilah Thornwick was about to learn what happened when that kind of engineering precision got weaponized for suburban warfare. Monday morning, Sebastian transformed his father's garage into something that would have made Pentagon war planners jealous. The smell of motor oil and old coffee mixed with the sharp scent of dry erase markers as he covered 3 whiteboards with Delilah's entire criminal enterprise, mapped out like a failure analysis report with color-coded timelines, financial flows, and victim profiles. Frank's old workbench became command central, covered with legal documents, property records, and Janet Morrison's handwritten intelligence reports that read like elementary school attendance sheets but contained enough evidence to destroy a real estate empire. 14 families harassed, 8 forced sales, 400,000 in stolen equity, Sebastian muttered, connecting red lines between violations and acquisitions like a detective tracking a serial killer. She's not running an HOA, she's running an organized crime syndicate with bylaw citations. Janet appeared Tuesday afternoon carrying a thermos of coffee that smelled like victory and determination. Her network of retired teacher friends had evolved into an intelligence operation that would have impressed the CIA. Apparently, elderly women who'd spent decades managing classroom politics were naturally gifted at suburban espionage. Margaret Henderson wants to testify, Janet reported, consulting notes written in the precise handwriting of someone who'd graded 10,000 book reports. Delilah threatened to have her declared mentally incompetent if she didn't sell. We have the voicemail recordings. Voicemail recordings? Honey, Margaret's 91, but she's not stupid. Been documenting everything since her grandson bought her a smartphone. Janet's laugh carried 4 decades of experience with elaborate student excuses. Delilah made the classic mistake of underestimating old ladies with technology. By Wednesday, Sebastian had financial projections showing that Delilah's scheme had generated over $400,000 in below-market acquisitions, with projected rental income exceeding $75,000 annually. The woman wasn't just stealing houses. She was stealing generational wealth from families who'd worked their entire lives to own something permanent in an uncertain world. That's when the engineering solution crystallized with beautiful, ruthless clarity. Sebastian didn't want to just stop Delilah. He wanted to destroy her so completely that every HOA tyrant in America would think twice before harassing another grieving homeowner. The vault door wasn't defense. It was psychological warfare disguised as home improvement. Phoenix Custom Security Solutions occupied a warehouse that smelled like metal shavings and tactical paranoia. Dave Kowalczyk, the owner, was a former Army engineer who'd transitioned from building things that kept soldiers alive to building things that kept rich people's stuff safe. You want a residential door that can stop everything short of a tank, but looks completely normal from the street? Dave sketched designs on graph paper with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd built similar projects for witness protection cases. That's unusual. Most clients want visible deterrence. I want invisible superiority. Someone's going to attack this door with hand tools and fail spectacularly in front of as many witnesses as possible. Dave's grin suggested he'd worked on revenge projects before. Composite steel core, titanium anchor bolts, biometric locks with satellite backup, electromagnetic deadbolts rated for commercial bank applications. Street view, suburban normal, close inspection, Fort Knox with a doorbell. Timeline and cost? 2 weeks fabrication, 6 hours installation, $22,000 total. Dave paused, studying Sebastian with professional curiosity. This isn't about security, is it? This is about making sure someone very specific understands the difference between harassment and home improvement. While Dave's team fabricated what was essentially a residential bank vault disguised as Home Depot normalcy, Sebastian orchestrated the intelligence phase with military precision. Maria Santos agreed to audit 3 years of HOA finances. Tom Berkeley discovered that Delilah's harassment campaigns consistently targeted properties with 0 actual violations under the original community charter. But Sebastian's strategic masterpiece was converting Mrs. Cecilia from victim to active intelligence asset. Her evening walks with her granddaughter provided perfect surveillance cover for documenting violations at Delilah's rental properties, commercial air conditioning units in residential zones, illegal parking, landscaping that violated the same standards she used to terrorize other homeowners. She breaks every rule she uses to attack families, Mrs. Cecilia reported with the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd discovered the neighborhood bully was actually a hypocrite with poor impulse control. Friday afternoon, Sebastian stood in his garage reviewing a case file that would have impressed federal prosecutors. Systematic harassment, manufactured evidence, financial fraud, civil rights violations affecting 14 families over 4 years. The vault door installation was scheduled for Saturday morning with maximum public visibility. Frank's navy blue mailbox caught the late afternoon sunlight through the garage door, still perfect after all these years because the old man had used marine-grade paint that could survive anything. Tomorrow, Sebastian would find out if his father's son had inherited that same kind of stubborn durability. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline Arizona perfection that made Sebastian understand why people fought wars over desert real estate. 78 degrees, infinite blue sky, and air that smelled like sage, possibility, and impending spectacular justice. By 8 a.m., Dave's crew was maneuvering 800 pounds of disguised bank vault into position while neighbors gathered like they were watching the Super Bowl of suburban warfare. Janet Morrison had brought homemade coffee cake and her intelligence-gathering golden retriever. Mrs. Cecilia arrived with her granddaughter and a folding chair positioned for optimal drama viewing. Sebastian felt his father's presence in the morning air, mixed with the metallic scent of precision engineering and the sweet anticipation of watching a bully discover the difference between intimidation and actual power. At 8:43, Delilah's white Lexus rounded the corner like a heat-seeking missile locked onto target. "Showtime," Janet murmured, checking her phone timer with the satisfaction of someone who'd correctly predicted human behavior based on 4 decades of managing classroom chaos. Delilah emerged wearing a crimson power suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, flanked by Brad Kowalski and 2 men Sebastian didn't recognize, one carrying official-looking paperwork, the other wielding a professional camera. "Mr. Rodriguez." Her voice cut across the morning with the authority of someone who'd never faced successful resistance. "Cease this installation immediately. You're in violation of emergency architectural restrictions." Sebastian looked up from Dave's engineering specifications, noting the slight tremor in Delilah's voice that suggested desperation disguised as confidence. "Good morning, Delilah. Beautiful day for legal home improvement. I have all required permits. Emergency HOA board vote last night superseded all pending architectural approvals." She waved the official paperwork like a battle flag. "No major exterior modifications until community impact assessment is completed." The silence that followed was broken by Tom Berkeley's dry chuckle. "Delilah, emergency board votes require 48-hour notice to all members. I'm on the board and I didn't receive any meeting notification." Sebastian watched Delilah's face cycle through surprise, anger, and calculation with the fascinating precision of someone realizing their authority was evaporating in real time. The meeting was properly noticed through established channels. Which channels? Maria Santos stepped out of the crowd carrying a banker's box that rattled with suspicious documents. "Because as treasurer, I'm required to approve all emergency meeting expenses. We have no record of any notices being sent." That's when Sebastian realized Delilah had made the fatal mistake of trying to improvise legal authority in front of people who actually understood legal procedures. Her fake emergency meeting was unraveling under basic procedural scrutiny. But Delilah's desperation drove her to escalate beyond anything Sebastian had anticipated. "Fine," she said, nodding to the man with the camera. "Mr. Rodriguez, smile for Channel 12 News. We're documenting how one selfish homeowner is destroying community property values with unauthorized fortress construction." And the camera operator stepped forward, and Sebastian recognized him as Tom Mitchell, Brad's brother-in-law who'd participated in the fake light meter incident. This wasn't news media, it was amateur hour propaganda disguised as journalism. "That's interesting," Sebastian said, pulling out his phone and speed dialing a number he'd memorized yesterday. "Because I actually contacted Channel 12 News yesterday about HOA corruption in Riverside Meadows. Let me check if they're planning coverage." The phone rang twice before a professional voice answered. "Channel 12 News, Investigative Desk, this is Rebecca Martinez." Sebastian put the call on speaker. "Rebecca, this is Sebastian Cecilia Rodriguez. You mentioned wanting to cover HOA fraud stories. I'm standing in front of my house right now with the HOA president who's trying to stop my legal construction project using fake emergency powers and impersonating news media. Mr. Cecilia Rodriguez, are you saying there's an active confrontation happening right now? With witnesses, documentation, and what appears to be systematic evidence of real estate fraud spanning multiple years. We're 15 minutes away." The effect on Delilah was immediate and catastrophic. The fake confidence cracked like overstressed concrete, revealing the panic underneath. "You can't just call news stations during private HOA business." "Delilah," Sebastian said with the calm precision of someone who'd spent 15 years dealing with government oversight, "HOA business conducted on public streets with fake media crews is public business, and fraud is always newsworthy." That's when the real shock came. Dave Kowalczyk stepped forward with the expression of someone who'd just connected several disturbing dots. "Actually, we need to discuss the break-in at my warehouse Wednesday night. Someone accessed confidential project files, including specifications for Mr. Rodriguez's door installation. Phoenix PD case number 2024-187432. The mathematical precision of the timeline hit everyone simultaneously. Break-in, Wednesday, fake emergency meeting Thursday, building department complaints Friday morning citing details that were stolen from private contractor files. "Dave," Sebastian said quietly, "did the security footage capture any recognizable faces?" "Funny you should ask." Dave pulled out his phone and showed a clear image of someone in dark clothing accessing file cabinets. Detective Morrison said the facial recognition software got a positive match. Sebastian looked at Delilah's face and saw the exact moment she realized that her desperation had driven her to commit actual felonies that were documented, investigated, and about to be exposed on live television. The sound of titanium bolts engaging echoed across the desert morning like a bank vault closing on someone's criminal career. The 20 minutes between Dave's security footage revelation and Channel 12's arrival were the longest of Delilah's professional life, and the most satisfying of Sebastian's. She tried to salvage the situation with increasingly desperate maneuvers that reminded Sebastian of watching structural failures in slow motion. Each attempt to prevent collapse only accelerated the inevitable catastrophe. That security footage could show anyone, Delilah said, her voice carrying the hollow confidence of someone who knew they were cornered. Dark clothing, unclear images, hardly conclusive evidence. Dave Kowalczyk smiled with the patience of someone who'd worked military intelligence before transitioning to civilian security. Actually, the timestamp shows the break-in occurred at 2:17 a.m. Thursday. Phoenix PD cross-referenced the facial recognition with vehicle registrations from nearby traffic cameras. "What kind of vehicle?" Sebastian asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "White Lexus, registered to Delilah Thornwick, Thornwick Real Estate LLC." The sound Mrs. Cecilia made was somewhere between a gasp and the noise her granddaughter made when catching classmates cheating on tests. "You broke into his business to steal information about his door?" But Delilah's desperation drove her beyond rational self-preservation. Instead of retreating, she doubled down with the kind of spectacular self-destruction that engineers study in failure analysis reports. "Even if that's true," she said, her red power suit now showing sweat stains despite the perfect morning weather, "Mr. Rodriguez's installation still violates community standards. The door is clearly designed for fortress-level security that's inappropriate for residential neighborhoods." Sebastian felt that familiar satisfaction when an opponent's attack revealed the exact weakness he'd been waiting to exploit. "Delilah, are you saying that homeowners don't have the right to install legal security systems on their own property? Excessive security measures create an atmosphere of fear and suspicion that damages community cohesion. Like changing someone's locks during their father's funeral?" The crowd's collective intake of breath was audible. Sebastian had been saving that emotional ammunition for maximum impact, and the timing was perfect. Delilah's face went through several color changes that clashed beautifully with her expensive suit. Janet Morrison stepped forward with the timing of someone who'd spent 40 years managing classroom confrontations. "Honey, are you really going to lecture people about community atmosphere after what you've done to 14 families over 4 years?" That's when Channel 12's news van rounded the corner, followed by a Phoenix Police Department cruiser that definitely wasn't part of Sebastian's plan but was absolutely welcome. Detective Morrison, no relation to Janet despite the shared surname, was a compact woman with the no-nonsense bearing of someone who'd spent 20 years dealing with white-collar criminals who thought they were smarter than law enforcement. "Ms. Thornwick, I'm Detective Morrison, Phoenix PD. We need to discuss the break-in at Phoenix Custom Security Solutions." Sebastian watched Delilah's last-ditch attempt to maintain control with the fascination of someone observing a complex system reaching catastrophic failure. "Detective, I'm in the middle of official HOA business." "Ma'am, breaking and entering is a felony. HOA business doesn't supersede criminal investigations." Rebecca Martinez from Channel 12 arrived with a camera crew that looked significantly more professional than Tom Mitchell's amateur hour operation. "Mr. Cecilia Rodriguez, we spoke on the phone. Can you walk us through what's happening here?" Sebastian gestured to his newly installed vault door, now fully operational and gleaming in the desert sunlight. "I installed a legal security system after my HOA president changed my locks during my father's military funeral. Since then, she's escalated to filing false complaints, manufacturing fake evidence, and apparently breaking into my contractor's business to steal confidential project information. And you have documentation of this pattern? 14 families, 4 years of systematic harassment, financial fraud involving community funds, and now felony burglary with photographic evidence." Rebecca Martinez's expression suggested she'd just realized this wasn't a simple neighbor dispute, but a major investigative story. "Can we interview some of these other families?" Janet Morrison stepped forward with a list that looked suspiciously like a class attendance sheet. "Honey, I've got names, addresses, and contact information for everyone who wants to go on record." That's when Delilah made her final desperate play, the kind of spectacular miscalculation that Sebastian would remember for the rest of his life. She walked directly to his vault door and began attacking it with her car keys. The sound of metal scraping against aerospace-grade steel was like fingernails on a chalkboard, except the chalkboard was designed to withstand explosives, and the fingernails were premium automotive keys that bent immediately upon contact. "This is what's wrong with America," Delilah screamed, her composure completely gone. Selfish people who think they can build walls and hide behind lawyers and fancy doors instead of participating in community standards. The Channel 12 camera captured every second of her meltdown in high-definition detail. Detective Morrison stepped closer with handcuffs ready. The neighbors pulled out phones to record what was obviously going to be the most talked-about moment in Riverside Meadows history, and Sebastian's vault door didn't show so much as a scratch. "Ma'am," Detective Morrison said with professional calm, "you need to step away from the property and place your hands behind your back." The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed across the desert morning like the closing of a book on someone's criminal career. Frank's navy blue mailbox caught the sunlight perfectly, still exactly the color it should be. The arrest of an HOA president on live television during a neighborhood barbecue was the kind of suburban spectacle that social media was invented to preserve for posterity. By noon, Sebastian's front yard had transformed into an impromptu block party. Someone had brought a grill, someone else contributed folding tables, and Janet Morrison had organized a potluck with the efficiency of someone who'd coordinated school fundraisers for 4 decades. The smell of grilled burgers mixed with desert air, and the sweet aroma of justice finally being served. Channel 12's Rebecca Martinez interviewed neighbors while Delilah sat in the back of Detective Morrison's patrol car, her red power suit now wrinkled, and her real estate empire crumbling in real time. The detective had found additional evidence in Delilah's car. Files on 6 more properties targeted for harassment, financial records showing systematic HOA fund misappropriation, and a burner phone containing threatening text messages sent to multiple homeowners. "This is bigger than residential fraud," Detective Morrison told Sebastian privately. "We're looking at organized criminal activity with civil rights violations. The FBI might want to take a look." Sebastian demonstrated his vault door for the news cameras with the pride of someone showing off a particularly elegant engineering solution. One fingerprint opened 800 pounds of titanium-reinforced steel so smoothly it seemed to weigh nothing. The biometric scanner, disguised as a decorative doorbell, responded instantly to authorized users while remaining completely invisible to casual observation. "From the street, it looks like every other front door in the neighborhood," Rebecca Martinez observed for her live broadcast. "But this is actually bank-grade security that could stop everything short of military-grade explosives." "The beauty of good engineering," Sebastian explained, "is that complexity appears simple. This door has electromagnetic locks, cellular backup systems, and battery power that could last a month during an outage, but it opens and closes just like any normal door, if you're authorized to use it." Mrs. Cecilia's granddaughter was fascinated by the biometric scanner. "Can it recognize my fingerprint too?" "If your grandmother approves, we can add you to the authorized user list," Sebastian said, then looked at Mrs. Cecilia. "You're welcome to stay here anytime you feel unsafe, especially if anyone tries to harass you about selling your house." The community transformation was visible in real time. Neighbors who'd been afraid to speak up about HOA harassment were now sharing stories openly, comparing violation notices, and realizing they'd all been targets of the same systematic scheme. Tom Berkeley and Maria Santos announced plans for a complete HOA board election with transparency requirements and financial oversight that would prevent future abuse. But the moment that defined everything came when Brad Kowalski approached Sebastian with the expression of someone who'd finally found the courage to do the right thing. "I need to apologize," Brad said, his voice barely audible above the neighborhood celebration. "I knew what she was doing wasn't right, but I was scared of getting sideways with her. I should have spoken up years ago." "Brad, you're speaking up now. That's what matters. I've got financial records going back 6 years. Bank statements, property transactions, communications with her real estate clients, everything. I kept copies because I was afraid she'd try to pin the financial crimes on me." Sebastian felt that familiar satisfaction of watching a complex system reveal its complete structure. "Brad, you just provided the missing piece that turns this from individual harassment into a federal case." The news coverage attracted attention from beyond Phoenix. By evening, Sebastian's story was trending on social media under #VaultDoorJustice, with thousands of comments from people sharing their own HOA horror stories. 3 other news stations requested interviews. A documentary filmmaker called about following up on the broader implications of HOA corruption. But the moment Sebastian would remember forever happened just before sunset. when Janet Morrison gathered everyone for an impromptu toast using red Solo cups filled with lemonade and beer. "To Sebastian Cecilia Rodriguez," she said, her teacher voice carrying across the gathered crowd, "who showed us that sometimes the best way to deal with bullies is to build something they can't tear down and then let them destroy themselves trying." The cheer that went up from 30 neighbors echoed across Riverside Meadows like a declaration of independence from petty tyranny. As the sun set behind the desert mountains, Sebastian stood beside his father's navy blue mailbox and his impregnable front door, watching neighbors who'd been strangers become a community united by the simple principle that home ownership meant something worth defending. His phone buzzed with the text from an unknown number. "Saw your story on the news. My HOA is pulling the same scam in Tucson. Can you help?" Sebastian smiled, thinking about his father's stubborn insistence that some fights were worth having regardless of the cost, and typed back, "Send me your documentation. Let's engineer a solution." The vault door clicked shut behind him with the satisfying sound of precision machinery protecting what mattered most. The principle that in America, your home was still your castle, and some doors were built too strong for bullies to break. 6 months later, Sebastian stood in his father's garden, watching Mrs. Cecilia's granddaughter practice her engineering presentation for the Frank Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship Competition. The 12-year-old was explaining how biometric security systems worked, using Sebastian's vault door as a visual aid for her STEM project on practical applications of advanced technology in residential security. "And the electromagnetic locks are powered by lithium backup batteries that can operate for 32 days without main power," she said with the confidence of someone who'd been tutored by a federal structural engineer and had absorbed technical specifications like a sponge. "Perfect," Sebastian said, adjusting the microphone system he'd installed for scholarship presentations. "Your grandfather would be proud that his mailbox inspired someone your age to study engineering." The Frank Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship had grown beyond anything Sebastian initially envisioned. Funded by the $127,000 in restitution money recovered from Delilah's criminal enterprise, plus contributions from grateful neighbors and donations inspired by national news coverage, the program now provided full college scholarships for local students pursuing careers in engineering, law, or community advocacy. Delilah Thornwick had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for fraud, embezzlement, and civil rights violations, followed by 5 years of probation during which she was prohibited from serving on any HOA board or working in real estate. Her company's assets were liquidated to pay restitution to the 14 families she'd systematically defrauded. The broader impact exceeded Sebastian's wildest expectations. His story had inspired similar investigations in 12 other states, resulting in federal legislation requiring transparency and accountability measures for HOA governance. The Vault Door Law, as media outlets nicknamed the Homeowner Protection Act, established clear limits on HOA authority and created federal penalties for systematic harassment disguised as community standards enforcement. Janet Morrison had been elected HOA president by unanimous vote, running on a platform of transparency, sanity, and no more bullshit. Her first official act was commissioning a community garden on the corner lot that Delilah had tried to acquire through harassment. The garden featured native desert plants, a memorial bench honoring Frank Rodriguez's military service, and a small plaque reading, "Home is where you plant your flag and defend what matters." Mrs. Cecilia had become the neighborhood's unofficial security coordinator, using her evening walks to document actual code violations, while helping elderly residents understand their rights under the new HOA transparency requirements. Her house now featured security lighting that actually complied with city ordinances, installed by Sebastian at no charge. The vault door itself had become a minor tourist attraction. Engineering students from Arizona State University requested tours to study the integration of military-grade security with residential aesthetics. Home security companies cited Sebastian's installation in their marketing materials. 3 documentary crews had filmed segments about the technical specifications and psychological impact of fortress-level home defense. But the achievement Sebastian treasured most was the transformation of Riverside Meadows from a community paralyzed by fear into a neighborhood where people actually looked out for each other. Property values had increased 12% after Delilah's removal, not because of intimidation and forced sales, but because people wanted to live somewhere with engaged, protective neighbors and transparent governance. Sebastian had started HOA Defense Engineering, a consulting service that helped homeowners document harassment, understand their legal rights, and design technical solutions to property disputes. His first client was a military veteran in Tucson whose HOA was trying to ban his service dog. His most recent case involved a Florida community where the HOA president was systematically targeting immigrant families. Every project started the same way: meticulous documentation, systematic analysis, and engineering solutions that transformed defensive positions into offensive advantages. On this particular evening, as Mrs. Cecilia's granddaughter practiced her scholarship presentation and neighbors gathered for their monthly community barbecue, Sebastian felt his father's presence in the desert air, pride mixed with the satisfaction of work completed properly. His phone buzzed with messages from 3 different news producers wanting interviews about copycat cases, 2 homeowners requesting consultation services, and 1 message that made him smile: Janet Morrison asking if he'd consider running for city council on a platform of engineering better government. Frank's navy blue mailbox caught the last rays of desert sunset, still exactly the color it should be after all these years. Sebastian opened his vault door and stepped inside, listening to the satisfying sound of precision machinery protecting what mattered most: the principle that in America, your home was your fortress, your community was your strength, and some doors were built too strong for any bully to break.
So there you have it. Sebastian went from sleeping in his job to owning the most secure door in Arizona. Delilah went from HOA president to federal prison. And that navy blue mailbox still standing exactly where Frank painted it. This wasn't about a vault door. It was about what happens when grip meets precision engineering. Sebastian could have repainted that mailbox, paid the fines, moved away like 14 other families. Instead, he understood something every bully hopes you never learn. Documentation beats intimidation. Sometimes the best defense is building something so strong that when they attack it, they destroy themselves. That $22,000 door was a statement. This is my home, dishonor my father, and you cannot touch what matters to me. Now, most of us can afford vault doors, but every single one of us can document everything, research our rights, and remember that HOA boards are just neighbors with clipboards, not king with unlimited power. Got your own HOA honor story? Drop it below. What is the pettiest violation you've received? Hit subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to back down when petty tyrant tries to steal their piece of the American dream. And remember, your home is your castle. Make them prove their authority matters more than your dignity.